At 2:47 p.m. on April 9th, 1936, Frank Hobbs cuts the engine on his Caterpillar 60 bulldozer and climbs down onto the cracked earth of the Texas Panhandle. 43 years old, hands scarred from 20 years of dirt work, face wrapped in a wet bandana that's already turning brown. He's staring at the horizon, and the horizon is gone. In its place, a wall. Black. 8,000 feet tall. Moving at 40 miles per hour, 300 miles wide, both stretching from the Oklahoma border deep into New Mexico. Behind him, the town of Dalhart, population 3,500. In front of him, 14 hours of darkness at 3 in the afternoon. The storm that's about to hit isn't weather, it's geology in motion. 300 million tons of topsoil ripped from farmland across 5 states, now airborne and coming fast. The Soil Conservation Service has been tracking this system for 6 hours, watching it build over the stripped wheat fields of western Kansas. Radio reports describe it as resembling a mountain range turned sideways. Static electricity in the dust is knocking out telephone lines 50 miles ahead of the front. Birds are falling from the sky, suffocated mid-flight. Hobbs climbs back onto the Cat 60. 8 tons of steel, a 60-horsepower engine, tracks 4 feet wide. He's part of a crew of 19 men, 8 bulldozers, operating under Hugh Hammond Bennett's Emergency Soil Conservation Program. Their job for the next 24 hours is simple and impossible. Build earthwork barriers fast enough to redirect the wind, save what topsoil remains, keep the storm from burying Dalhart completely. Last year, nearby Boise City, Oklahoma, got hit by a similar storm. Drifts 12 feet high against the buildings, Main Street impassable. 2 children suffocated in a schoolhouse when dust came through the walls. The federal government has invested $48,000 in this operation. 19 men, 8 bulldozers, 12 hours of daylight left before the wall hits. Maybe. Hobbs drops the blade, starts cutting. The Caterpillar 60 was built for this. Designed in 1925, it's the workhorse of the great earth-moving projects of the 30s. Hoover Dam used them, the Lincoln Highway. Now they're being deployed against erosion itself, against the consequences of 40 years of farming that treated the Great Plains like an infinite resource. The blade is 6 feet wide. It can move 2 cubic yards of earth per pass. In dry ground, the Cat 60 can cut 100 feet of furrow 18 inches deep in under 4 minutes. But this ground isn't just dry, it's atomized. The soil has lost its structure. It flows like sand. If you want to see how these men fought a storm with machines that barely existed a decade earlier, hit that like button. It helps us share these forgotten engineering battles. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Hobbs. The plan is something Hugh Hammond Bennett calls emergency terracing. Cut furrows perpendicular to the wind direction. Every 100 yards, a long, shallow ditch that will catch the wind low to the ground, force it up and over, reduce its scouring power. Between the furrows, leave ridges. Plant them later with native grasses, but right now just create surface texture. Why, anything to break up the smooth, exposed earth that's been feeding these storms for 6 years. The math is brutal. Dalhart sits on the eastern edge of the storm's projected path. They need to cut 30 miles of furrows by midnight. That's 158,400 feet. 8 bulldozers working in a line, each machine responsible for about 20,000 feet, just under 4 miles, per machine. In 8 hours, in dust so thick you can't see the bulldozer 50 feet ahead. At 3:15 p.m., the temperature drops 11 degrees in 4 minutes. The front edge of the storm hits like a physical thing. The sky doesn't darken gradually. It shuts off. Visibility goes from 2 miles to 20 feet. The air tastes like copper and drought. Hobbs feels the bulldozer shudder as the wind hits, sustained gusts at 45 miles per hour with punches up to 70. The dust isn't falling. It's traveling horizontally at waist height, a river of soil moving east. He can hear it hissing against the metal tracks, a sound like rain that isn't rain. The Caterpillar's engine note changes. Dust is getting into the air intake despite the filters. The oil bath filter on the 60 was designed for construction sites, not atmospheric soil. The men have wrapped extra burlap around the intakes, soaked it in diesel fuel, hoping the sticky surface will catch particles before they reach the carburetor. It helps, not enough. Within 90 minutes of the storm hitting, two of the 8 machines have overheating engines. The dust is scouring the cylinder walls, degrading the compression. One cat develops a misfire and has to drop back. 6 bulldozers still running. 4 miles per machine has just become 5 miles per machine. Hobbs keeps the blade down and drives by feel. He can't see the furrow he's cutting, can't see the ground. The world is a brown void with a strip of disturbed earth directly beneath him, visible only because it's a slightly different shade of brown. So every 100 yards, he raises the blade, pivots the bulldozer, starts a new line parallel to the first. The spacing has to be precise. Too far apart and the wind screams through uninterrupted. Too close and they're wasting time cutting furrows that do the same job. Bennett's guidelines say 100 yards. Hobbs paces it by counting the seconds it takes to drive between cuts. At the cat's maximum speed in this visibility, about 4 miles per hour, 100 yards takes roughly 50 seconds. He counts. He cuts, counts, cuts. The storm reaches full intensity at 5:30 p.m. This is the core, the densest part of the system, where visibility drops to 0. Hobbs ties himself to the bulldozer with a rope. Other operators are doing the same. If you fall off the machine in this, you could walk 15 feet in the wrong direction and never find it again. In this kind of storm, men have died 20 feet from their own houses, disoriented, lungs filling with dust. Now, the static electricity is constant now. Every piece of metal on the bulldozer is crackling. When Hobbs touches the steering clutch, blue sparks jump an inch. The air feels alive. The diesel engine on the Caterpillar 60 has a fuel tank capacity of 28 gallons. At full load, it burns about 2 gallons per hour. That's 14 hours of operation before refueling. But full load assumes normal ground conditions. In this dust, in this wind, every cut is maximum load. And the engine is screaming at 1,200 RPM continuously. Hobbs has burned through half his fuel in 3 hours. The refueling crew is supposed to come out every 4 hours with a truck carrying 55-gallon drums. At 6 p.m., they haven't shown. The visibility is too bad. The truck is stuck. 3 of the 6 remaining bulldozers run out of fuel between 6:15 and 6:40 p.m. 3 machines, 10 miles of furrows still needed. The storm shows no signs of stopping. Hobbs watches one of the other operators, while a man named Jack Greer unhook his safety rope and climb down from his dead bulldozer. Greer walks, stumbles really, toward Hobbs's machine. It takes him 8 minutes to cross 40 feet. When he reaches the Caterpillar, he climbs up, puts his mouth near Hobbs's ear, and yells over the wind and engine noise, "Siphon fuel from the dead cats. Keep 1 running per section." It's the only option. They work in pairs. One man on each dead bulldozer with a length of rubber hose, siphoning fuel from the tanks, pouring it into 5-gallon cans. Another man running the cans 50 yards through 0 visibility to the still operating machines. It takes 23 minutes to transfer enough fuel to keep 1 bulldozer running for another 2 hours. Every minute spent siphoning is a minute not cutting furrows. But a bulldozer without fuel is just 8 tons of dead steel. By 9 p.m., they're down to 2 machines running continuously. The other operators have become a fuel and repair crew, moving between the working bulldozers, keeping them alive. One cat develops a cracked fuel line. They wrap it with friction tape and canvas soaked in grease. It holds. Another throws a track when the drive sprocket seizes from dust infiltration. They spend 45 minutes in near-total darkness lying on the ground, prying the track back onto the wheels with sledgehammers and iron bars. The dust is so thick it's forming drifts against the bulldozers while they work. 6-inch deep piles in the 90 seconds it takes to walk around to the other side of the machine. At 11:47 p.m., the wind begins to decrease, not stop, decrease. The wall is passing. This is the trailing edge, the backside of the system where the dust is still airborne but the forward velocity is dropping. Visibility increases from 0 to 20 feet. Then 50. By 1:30 a.m. on April 10th, Hobbs can see the stars. The ground he's been cutting all night is unrecognizable. What was farmland is now a desert of ripples and dunes. But the furrows are there, 31 miles of them, cut in 18 hours instead of 8, by men who stayed on machines that should have stopped a dozen times. The furrows aren't perfect. The spacing varies. Some sections are too shallow, but they're there. Long scars in the earth, perpendicular to the wind. While creating the first intentional surface roughness this land has seen since the native buffalo grass was plowed under 40 years ago. The storm moves on toward Kansas. It will drop dust on Chicago. It will darken the sky over Washington, D.C. Particles will fall on ships 400 miles into the Atlantic. But Dalhart is still visible. The drifts against the buildings are 3 feet deep, not 12. The streets are passable. No one suffocated. The furrows broke the wind enough to matter. So Hugh Hammond Bennett arrives by truck at dawn. He walks the lines with Hobbs, measuring the wind shadow behind each furrow with a surveyor's tape. The reduction in ground-level wind speed averages 38%. The soil deposition on the leeward side of each furrow is 7 inches deep. Soil that would have continued east, adding to the storm, now captured and held. Bennett does the math in his notebook. If they'd cut these furrows across the entire storm path, which is impossible, but theoretically, they could have reduced the total airborne soil by 11%. 27 million tons kept on the ground instead of lofted into the stratosphere. The Caterpillar. 60 bulldozers are ruined. The engines need complete rebuilds. The tracks are worn down to half their normal thickness. The fuel systems are contaminated with dust so fine it passed through filters designed for concrete aggregate. The total operating cost for this one night of work, $4,200 in 1936 dollars. Adjusted for inflation, about $92,000 in modern terms. But the cost of the topsoil that blew past Dalhart that night had the furrows not been there, incalculable. That soil took 10,000 years to form. Once it's in the air, it's gone. The Federal Soil Conservation Service will expand the program. By the end of 1936, they'll have 47 bulldozers operating across the Dust Bowl region, cutting emergency terraces, building windbreaks, reshaping the land to resist erosion. The Caterpillar 60 will become synonymous with soil conservation. Appearing in Department of Agriculture films, government posters, newsreels about the fight to save the Great Plains. But the real battle happened here on this night with 19 men and 8 machines that kept running when they shouldn't have been able to. Frank Hobbs returns to Dalhart 3 months later. The furrows he cut are now planted with native grass seed, blue grama, buffalo grass, Indian grass. The roots are starting to hold. The land is learning to resist the wind again. It's not enough to stop the Dust Bowl. Oh, that will take years of rain, of changed farming practices, of millions of acres retired from wheat production. But it's a start. It's proof that the land can be taught to defend itself. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. These machines and the people who operated them saved towns from being erased by their own soil. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The last great dust storm of the Dust Bowl era hits in 1938. By then, 600 bulldozers are working soil conservation across the plains. The lessons learned on April 9, 1936. How to cut effective terraces in a storm. How to keep machines running in atmospheric dust. How to measure the effectiveness of emergency earthworks. Become standard practice. The Dust Bowl doesn't end because the storms stop. It ends because the land becomes more resistant to becoming a storm. Frank Hobbs operates bulldozers for the Soil Conservation Service until 1943, when he's drafted into the Army Corps of Engineers. He spends World War II cutting roads across North Africa, building airstrips in Sicily. After the war, he returns to Dalhart. The town is still there. The furrows he cut in 1936 are still visible in aerial photographs, long scars in the earth that mark where machines fought wind. He dies in 1964, age 71. See his obituary in the Dalhart Texan mentions that he worked soil conservation during the hard years. It doesn't mention the night he and 7 bulldozers held the line against 300 miles of moving dust. That's not the kind of thing that makes obituaries, but it's the kind of thing that makes history.